The preacher's widow lay curled on the front pew of the chapel, her dark hair spilling across the worn wood like ink on parchment. And that was how Vincent Shaw first saw her in the pale dawn light of April 1878. He had ridden into Opal, Montana territory, just before midnight, his horse exhausted, and his own body aching from 3 days of hard travel. The town was small, barely more than a main street with a handful of buildings clustered around it like chickens seeking warmth. Vincent had meant to find the boarding house, but in the darkness and his fatigue, he had stumbled toward the only building with its door slightly ajar, the chapel. He had thought to rest on a pew for just a moment before finding proper lodging, but the sound of soft, hitching breaths had stopped him cold. Now, in the growing light filtering through the simple glass windows, he could see her clearly. She wore black from neck to ankle, the fabric dusty and creased as though she had been traveling. One hand was tucked beneath her cheek, the other clutched a small leather Bible to her chest. Even in sleep, her face held a tightness around the eyes and mouth that spoke of recent grief. Vincent removed his hat and stood there uncertainly. He was a tall man of 26 years, broad-shouldered from years of ranch work, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of storm clouds. He had seen hardship in his time, had lost his own father to fever 2 winters past, but something about the vulnerability of this woman sleeping in a house of God struck him deep in his chest. He cleared his throat gently. "Madam." She woke instantly, sitting upright with such sudden force that her Bible tumbled to the floor. Her eyes were wide and startled, green as new grass, and her hand went to her throat as she took him in. Vincent raised both hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. "I apologize for frightening you, madam. I did not mean to intrude. I thought the chapel was empty." She blinked at him, then seemed to remember herself. She smoothed her skirts and bent to retrieve the Bible, her cheeks coloring. "I must have fallen asleep. I only meant to pray for a while." Her voice was soft but clear, with a slight tremor that might have been from sleep or fear. Vincent shifted his weight. "Are you waiting for someone? The preacher, perhaps?" Something flickered across her face, pain sharp as a knife blade. "The preacher was my husband. He passed 3 weeks ago." Pneumonia took him very quickly. Vincent felt his stomach drop. "I am deeply sorry for your loss." She nodded, accepting his condolence with a grace that suggested she had heard those words many times already. "Thank you. I am Eleanor Zimmerman, or I was. I suppose I am still, though the name feels strange now without him." "Vincent Shaw, madam." He hesitated, then asked the question that seemed most pressing. "Forgive me for asking, but why are you sleeping here in the chapel? Surely there is somewhere more comfortable you might rest." Eleanor's hands tightened on the Bible. She looked away, toward the simple wooden cross that hung above the altar. "The church board met yesterday. They have appointed a new preacher, a younger man from Helena. He arrives tomorrow with his family. They need the house that adjoins the chapel, the one where my husband and I lived for the past year. I was told I needed to vacate the premises by this morning." Vincent felt anger kindle in his chest. "They turned you out with nowhere to go. They suggested I might have family to return to." Her voice was steady, but he could hear the hurt beneath it. "I do not. My parents died of cholera when I was 15. I went to live with an aunt in St. Louis, but she passed 2 years ago. My husband was all I had. When I married him, I thought I was gaining not just a partner but a community, a place to belong. I was mistaken. What about the congregation? Surely someone offered you a room." Eleanor's smile was small and bitter. "You would think so. But my husband, God rest his soul, was not always the most tactful of men. He preached hellfire and damnation more than love and mercy. He made enemies of those who did not live up to his standards. I fear his widow is not particularly welcome in most homes." Vincent found himself studying her more closely. She could not be more than 22 or 23, he guessed. Far too young to be a widow, far too young to be so alone in the world. There was a strength in the set of her jaw, but also an exhaustion that went bone deep. "You cannot sleep in a chapel," he said finally. "It is not safe and it is not right. I have little choice at present. I have some money, not much, but enough perhaps to take a stage somewhere. I have been trying to decide where to go. I thought prayer might provide guidance, but I fear I am not receiving clear answers." She attempted another smile. "Perhaps I am too tired to hear them properly." Vincent made a decision that surprised even himself. "I have a ranch about 10 miles north of here. It is not much, just a small operation, but the house has 2 bedrooms. One was my father's before he passed. It sits empty now. You could stay there, just until you get your bearings and figure out what you want to do next." Eleanor stared at him as though he had spoken in a foreign tongue. "You are offering me a room in your home, a stranger." "I am offering you a safe place to rest, madam. Nothing more, nothing less. You can bolt your door if it makes you feel safer. I have a housekeeper who comes 3 days a week, an older woman named Mrs. Patterson. She can serve as a chaperone of sorts if that concerns you, but you do not know me at all. I know you are a widow in need of help. That seems like enough." He turned his hat in his hands. "My mother, before she died when I was a boy, used to say that we are put in each other's paths for a reason. Maybe I was meant to come to this chapel this morning. Maybe you were meant to be here." Eleanor looked at him for a long moment, and Vincent had the sense she was weighing him, measuring his character with those sharp green eyes. Finally, she said, "Why are you in Opal, Mr. Shaw? You said you rode in late last night." "I came to purchase breeding stock from a rancher who lives near here. I am trying to improve my herd. I have an appointment with him this afternoon. And you just happened upon the chapel. I was looking for the boarding house in the dark and got turned around. I saw the door was open and thought to rest a moment." He met her gaze squarely. "I am many things, Mrs. Zimmerman, but I am not a liar and I am not a man who would harm a woman. You have my word on that." She stood slowly, smoothing her black skirts once more. She was shorter than he had expected, the top of her head barely reaching his shoulder. "I do not know if this is wise, but I also do not know what other options I have. I accept your offer, Mr. Shaw, with gratitude, but only until I can make other arrangements." "That is all I am offering," he assured her. "Do you have belongings that need collecting?" "A trunk and a carpetbag. They are in the room behind the chapel, the small one the preacher used for counseling." She paused. "I should leave a note for the church board letting them know I have gone." "I would not want them to worry." Vincent doubted very much that the church board would worry overmuch about Eleanor Zimmerman, but he appreciated her courtesy. "I will fetch your trunk while you write your note. Is it very heavy?" "Not terribly. Most of what it contains are my husband's books and papers. I could not bear to leave them behind, though I do not know what I will do with them." Her voice caught slightly on the words. Vincent found the trunk where she had indicated. It was indeed heavy, full of leather-bound volumes and sheaves of paper covered in a tight, cramped handwriting. He hoisted it onto his shoulder and carried it out to where his horse waited, still tied to the post outside the chapel. The animal, a sturdy bay gelding named Rusty, whickered softly in greeting. Eleanor emerged a few minutes later, carrying the carpetbag and wearing a black bonnet. She handed Vincent a folded piece of paper. "Could you leave this on the altar? I could not bring myself to do it." He took the note and went inside, placing it carefully on the simple wooden altar. When he returned, Eleanor was stroking Rusty's nose, murmuring soft words to the horse. Rusty, who was generally suspicious of strangers, seemed perfectly content with her attention. "He likes you," Vincent observed. "I have always gotten along well with animals, better than with people sometimes." She looked up at him. "How will we both ride? I can walk if necessary." "Not in those skirts, not 10 miles. Rusty can carry us both easily enough. It will just be a bit slower going." He secured the trunk and carpet bag behind the saddle, then swung himself up. He extended a hand to Eleanor. "Put your foot on mine and I will pull you up." She hesitated only briefly before accepting his help. A moment later, she was seated behind him, her arms wrapped tentatively around his waist. Vincent could feel her trembling slightly, though whether from fear, exhaustion, or simply the strangeness of the situation, he could not tell. "Hold on tight," he instructed. "I will not let you fall." They rode out of Opal as the sun climbed higher, turning the Montana sky a brilliant, cloudless blue. The town was beginning to wake, smoke rising from chimneys, the sound of a rooster crowing somewhere in the distance. A few early risers gave them curious looks, but no one called out or tried to stop them. Vincent suspected Eleanor Zimmerman would be forgotten quickly once the new preacher and his family arrived. The ride to the Shaw Ranch took nearly 2 hours. The land rolled gently, covered in spring grass and dotted with wildflowers. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still dusted with snow. Eleanor did not speak during the journey, but Vincent could feel her gradually relaxing against him, her grip on his waist becoming less desperate and more natural. When the ranch house came into view, modest and weathered but solid, Eleanor stirred. "Is this your home?" "For the past 8 years. My father and I built it ourselves when we first claimed this land. It is not much to look at, but it is sturdy and keeps the weather out." The house was a simple rectangular structure made of logs, with a covered porch across the front and a stone chimney at one end. Nearby stood a barn, a chicken coop, and several corrals. Cattle grazed in the fields beyond, perhaps 50 head in total. Vincent helped Eleanor down, then dismounted himself. She swayed slightly when her feet touched the ground, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "When did you last eat, Mrs. Zimmerman?" she frowned, thinking. "Yesterday morning, I believe. There was a little bread left in the house. You must be famished. Come inside and I will fix you something." He grabbed her trunk and carpet bag, carrying them toward the house. The interior was clean but sparse, furnished with handmade furniture and a few simple comforts. The main room served as both kitchen and sitting area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. 2 doors led off to the bedrooms. Vincent set Eleanor's belongings down and went to the kitchen area. "I have eggs and bacon, and I can make some coffee. It is not fancy fare, but it will fill your stomach." Eleanor removed her bonnet and looked around with interest. "May I help? You may sit and rest." "You look like you are about to fall over." He pointed to one of the chairs at the wooden table. She obeyed, sinking into the chair with a sigh that seemed to come from her very soul. Vincent busied himself with the stove, getting a fire going and setting a pan on to heat. He worked efficiently, the movements practiced from years of cooking for himself and his father. "You cook well," Eleanor observed, watching him crack eggs into a bowl. "A man living alone learns quickly or he starves." He poured the eggs into the sizzling pan. "Mrs. Patterson brings me supper a few times a week, and sometimes I eat at the boarding house in town, but mostly I fend for myself." "Where is Mrs. Patterson now?" "She comes Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Today is Thursday, so you will meet her tomorrow." He flipped the eggs expertly. "She is a good woman, a widow herself. Her husband was a rancher who died in a stampede 5 years back. She has a small house in town but likes to keep busy." The smell of cooking food seemed to revive Eleanor somewhat. Color began to return to her pale cheeks. When Vincent set a plate before her, piled high with eggs and bacon and a thick slice of bread, she looked at it as though it were a feast. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You have been exceedingly kind to me, Mr. Shaw. I do not know how to repay you. No repayment is necessary. Just eat and regain your strength." He poured coffee into 2 tin cups and sat down across from her with his own plate. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. Vincent found himself watching Eleanor from beneath his lashes, noting the delicate way she handled her fork, the way her eyes half closed in pleasure at the taste of the food. When she reached for her coffee and took a sip, she made a small sound of contentment. "I do not think I realized how hungry I was," she admitted, "or how tired. It feels as though I have been numb for weeks, just going through the motions of each day without really feeling anything." "Grief does that," Vincent said. "After my father died, I went through months where nothing seemed quite real. I would wake up and forget he was gone, then remember all over again. It was like losing him fresh each morning." Eleanor looked at him with new understanding. "How did you bear it?" "Work, mostly. I threw myself into improving the ranch, expanding the herd, building new fences. Keeping my hands busy kept my mind from dwelling too much." He paused. "And time. People say time heals all wounds. I do not know if that is true, but it does make them hurt less sharply." "Were you and your father close?" "Very. My mother died when I was 8. After that, it was just the two of us. He taught me everything I know about ranching, about being a man." Vincent felt the familiar ache in his chest. "I miss him every day, but I can think of him now without feeling like I am drowning." Eleanor set down her fork. "My husband and I were not particularly close. Is that a terrible thing to say?" Vincent considered his words carefully. "It is honest. I married him because I had nowhere else to go after my aunt died. He offered me stability, a home, a purpose. I thought that would be enough. I tried to be a good wife to him, to support his ministry, to manage the household well. But he was 20 years older than me and set in his ways. We lived together, but we were never truly partners. Does that make sense?" "It does. I feel guilty that I am not more devastated by his death. I am sad, of course. He was not a cruel man, just a rigid one. But mostly I feel lost, like I am adrift with no anchor." She looked down at her hands. "And now I am telling all of this to a stranger. You must think me very odd. I think you are a woman who has been holding a great deal inside and needed to let some of it out." Vincent finished his coffee and stood to pour more. "Sometimes it is easier to talk to a stranger than to someone who knows you. There is no judgment, no expectations." Eleanor watched him move around the kitchen with a thoughtful expression. "You are not what I expected when I saw you standing in the chapel this morning. What did you expect?" "I do not know, but not such kindness, not such understanding." She smiled, a real smile this time that reached her eyes. "Thank you for that, Mr. Shaw. Thank you for seeing me as a person and not just a problem to be solved or avoided. Call me Vincent, please." "And you are very welcome, Eleanor." He caught himself. "If I may call you Eleanor, you may. Mrs. Zimmerman makes me feel like an old woman or like I am play-acting at being my husband's wife." She stood and began gathering the dishes. "Let me clean up at least. You cooked." They worked together to clear the table and wash the dishes, falling into an easy rhythm that surprised them both. When everything was clean and put away, Vincent showed Eleanor to the bedroom that had been his father's. It was small but comfortable, with a wide bed covered in a handmade quilt, a dresser, and a washstand. "It is not fancy, but the mattress is good and the room gets nice light in the mornings," Vincent said. "The door has a bolt on the inside, as I mentioned. You should feel perfectly safe." Eleanor set her carpet bag on the bed and looked around. "It is lovely. Much nicer than the little room I shared with my husband at the parsonage. She turned to face him. When will you need to leave for your appointment? Vincent glanced out the window, judging the angle of the sun. In about an hour. I should not be gone more than a few hours. Will you be all right here alone? I will be fine. I think I might rest for a while if that is acceptable. I feel like I could sleep for a week. Sleep as long as you need. Make yourself at home. He paused in the doorway. Eleanor, I want you to know that you are welcome to stay as long as you need to. I meant what I said about there being no conditions or expectations. You are safe here. Her eyes grew bright with unshed tears. I believe you. I do not know why, but I do. Vincent left her to rest and went to tend to Rusty, giving the horse a good rub-down and fresh water and feed. Then he saddled a different horse, a black mare named Pepper, and rode back toward Opal. His meeting with the rancher went well, and he arranged to purchase 3 bulls and 10 heifers to improve his breeding stock. The animals would be delivered in a week's time. On the ride back to the ranch, Vincent found his thoughts returning again and again to Eleanor. He could not explain the pull he felt toward her, the protective instinct that had flared to life the moment he saw her sleeping in that chapel. He had known her for only a few hours, yet something in her resonated with something in him. Perhaps it was their shared understanding of loss. Perhaps it was simply loneliness recognizing loneliness. When he arrived home, the house was quiet. He looked in on Eleanor and found her asleep on top of the quilt, still fully dressed, her face peaceful in repose. He closed the door softly and went about his evening chores, feeding the animals and checking the fences in the near pastures. Mrs. Patterson arrived the next morning with her usual bustle of energy. She was a stout woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. When Vincent told her about Eleanor, she listened with interest and no small amount of concern. "You brought a strange woman to live in your house," Mrs. Patterson said, her hands on her hips. "Vincent Shaw, what were you thinking?" "I was thinking she needed help and I could provide it." "She is the widow of a preacher, Mrs. Patterson. She was sleeping in a chapel because the church turned her out." Mrs. Patterson's expression softened. "Well, that is shameful behavior on their part. Where is this young woman now? Still sleeping, I think. She was exhausted." "I will make a proper breakfast, something with more nutrition than your bachelor fare, and I will want to meet her, of course." She began pulling ingredients from the cupboards. "What is her name?" "Eleanor Zimmerman." "How old is she?" "I did not ask, but I would guess around 22 or 23. Mrs. Patterson gave him a knowing look. "And is she pretty?" Vincent felt heat rise in his face. "I did not particularly notice." "That means yes, then." She began mixing batter for pancakes. "You be careful, Vincent." A young woman alone, a young man alone living under the same roof. People will talk. Let them talk. I'm not going to turn away someone in need just because of gossip. Eleanor emerged about an hour later, drawn by the smell of cooking. She had changed into a different black dress and pinned her hair up neatly. She looked rested but shy when she saw Mrs. Patterson. "You must be Mrs. Zimmerman," the older woman said warmly. "I am Ada Patterson. Vincent has told me about your situation. I am very sorry for your loss." "Thank you," Eleanor said, "and thank you for welcoming me into your routine. I hope my presence here does not cause you too much disruption." "Nonsense. I am glad Vincent is finally showing some sense in looking after things properly." She waved toward the table. "Sit, sit. Breakfast is almost ready." Over pancakes and eggs and fresh coffee, the 3 of them talked easily. Mrs. Patterson asked Eleanor gentle questions about her life, and Eleanor answered with growing confidence. Vincent watched the 2 women interact and felt something settle in his chest. He had been right to bring Eleanor here. She needed this, a place to breathe and heal, and he found he needed it too, the presence of another person in his home, the sound of voices and laughter. As the days turned into weeks, a routine developed. Mrs. Patterson came 3 times a week and treated Eleanor like the daughter she had never had, teaching her recipes and the particulars of running a ranch household. Eleanor threw herself into the work with an energy that surprised Vincent. She learned to bake bread and churn butter, to tend the chickens and gather eggs, to plant a kitchen garden. She attacked each task as though her life depended on mastering it. "I need to be useful," she explained to Vincent one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set. "I need to earn my keep." "You do not need to earn anything. You are a guest." "I cannot think of myself that way. If I am just a guest, then I am temporary, and I do not know where I will go when my time here ends." She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Let me contribute. Let me feel like I have a purpose." Vincent could not argue with that, so he let her help however she wanted. And he found he enjoyed coming in from a long day of work to find supper waiting, the house clean and welcoming, Eleanor sitting in the lamplight mending his shirts or reading from one of his father's books. They talked in the evenings, long conversations that ranged from the profound to the mundane. Eleanor told him about growing up in Ohio, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a seamstress, about her love of reading and her dream of one day traveling to see the ocean. Vincent told her about building the ranch with his father, about the harsh winters and the satisfaction of watching the herd grow, about his hope of one day having one of the most successful ranches in the territory. "You could do it," Eleanor said one night. "You have the determination and the knowledge. All you need is time and luck. Ranching requires a fair amount of luck, perhaps, but I think you make your own luck more than you realize." She looked at him over the top of the sock she was darning. "You took a chance on me, a complete stranger. That took courage. That took basic human decency. Many people do not possess even that." She set down her mending. "Vincent, I have been here for nearly a month now. I should start thinking about my next steps. I cannot impose on your hospitality forever." Vincent felt his stomach drop. "You are not imposing. I thought we had established that. Even so, I need to figure out my future. I have been thinking perhaps I could find work as a teacher or a governess. I have a good education and I am patient with children." "There are not many opportunities for that sort of work out here," Vincent said carefully. "You would likely need to go to a larger city. Denver, perhaps, or San Francisco." Eleanor nodded slowly. "I know. The thought terrifies me if I am honest. Going somewhere completely new where I know no one at all. But I cannot stay here indefinitely, living off your charity." "What if you did not think of it as charity?" She looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Vincent had not planned to say what came out of his mouth next, but once the words started, he could not stop them. "What if you stayed here permanently, not as a guest, but as my wife?" Eleanor stared at him, her face going pale. "What? Marry me, Eleanor. Stay here and help me build this ranch into something great. We work well together, we enjoy each other's company. That is more than many marriages start with." "Vincent, you cannot be serious. We have known each other for a month." "I am completely serious. I have thought about this for days now. I know it seems sudden, but think about it logically. You need a home and a purpose. I need a partner, someone to share the work and the life I am building here. We could help each other." Eleanor stood and walked to the edge of the porch, her arms wrapped around herself. "This is madness." "Why?" "People marry for practical reasons all the time. You did it yourself once before." She whirled to face him. "And look how that turned out. I was miserable, Vincent. I spent 2 years living with a man I respected but did not love, going through the motions of being a wife without any of the real connection. I cannot do that again." Vincent rose and moved toward her slowly, as though she were a skittish horse that might bolt. "It would not be like that with us. We are friends, Eleanor. We talk and laugh and understand each other. That is more than what you had before. But we do not love each other. Not yet, perhaps, but I believe we could. I believe we are already starting to." He reached out and gently took her hand. "I care about you, Eleanor. I care about your happiness and your future. I think about you all day while I am working. I look forward to coming home because you are here. Is that not the beginning of love?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I do not know. I have never felt real love, romantic love. I do not know what it is supposed to feel like." "Neither do I," Vincent admitted. "But I think it feels like this, like wanting to see someone smile, like feeling better just because they are near, like being willing to build a life together even when the future is uncertain." Eleanor searched his face. "You truly want this? You want to marry me?" "I do. More than I have wanted anything in a long time." He squeezed her hand gently. "But only if you want it too. I will not pressure you or make you feel obligated. If you truly want to leave and try to make your way in Denver or San Francisco, I will help you do that. I will give you money for the journey and letters of recommendation, whatever you need. You would do that even if I said no to your proposal, of course. Your happiness matters to me regardless of whether you become my wife." She closed her eyes and more tears leaked out from beneath her lids. "I do not want to leave. I am happy here, happier than I have been in years, maybe happier than I have ever been, but I am afraid." "Of what?" "Of making another mistake, of agreeing to something that will leave me feeling trapped and alone again." Vincent used his free hand to gently wipe the tears from her face. "I cannot promise you perfection, Eleanor. I cannot promise that we will never disagree or have hard times. But I can promise that I will never make you feel trapped or alone. I can promise that I will listen to you and value your opinions. I can promise that I will work every day to build a partnership with you, not a prison." Eleanor opened her eyes and looked at him, and in that moment, Vincent saw something shift in her expression. "Ask me again," she whispered. "Eleanor Zimmerman, will you marry me? Will you take my name and share my life? Will you build this ranch and this future with me?" She took a shaky breath and nodded. "Yes, yes, I will marry you, Vincent Shaw." He pulled her into his arms then, holding her close as she cried against his shoulder. He stroked her hair and murmured reassurances, feeling his own eyes burn with emotion. This woman had come into his life by pure chance, a stranger sleeping in a chapel, and now she was going to be his wife. It felt both completely improbable and utterly right. When Eleanor finally pulled back, she was laughing through her tears. "This is insane. We are both insane." "Probably," Vincent agreed. "But I would rather be insane with you than sensible alone." They were married 2 weeks later by a traveling preacher who came through the area. Mrs. Patterson stood as witness and cried happy tears throughout the ceremony. Eleanor wore a simple dress of pale blue, having declared she was done with black. "I mourned my first husband properly," she said, "but I will not begin my second marriage in the colors of grief." Vincent bought her a thin gold band from the general store in opal, and when he slipped it onto her finger, his hand trembled. Eleanor looked up at him with those green eyes, now bright with something that might have been joy or might have been terror or might have been both, and said her vows in a clear, steady voice. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her gently, just a soft press of lips that lasted only a moment. It was their first kiss, and it felt both strange and wonderful. Mrs. Patterson insisted on preparing a wedding supper for them, a feast of roast chicken and potatoes and pie. She fussed over them like they were her own children, making sure their plates were full and their glasses never empty. When she finally left for the evening, The sun was setting and Vincent and Eleanor were alone together as husband and wife. They stood awkwardly in the main room, suddenly shy with each other. Eleanor twisted her new ring around her finger. "I suppose we should discuss the sleeping arrangements." "We should," Vincent agreed. "Eleanor, I want you to know that I expect nothing from you tonight or any night until you are ready. We may be married in the eyes of the law and God, but I meant what I said about building a partnership. That includes being patient with each other." Relief flooded her face. "Thank you. I know it is your right as my husband to expect me to share your bed, but I am not ready for that yet. I need time." "Then take all the time you need. I will continue sleeping in my room and you can continue sleeping in yours. When and if you want that to change, you need only tell me." She crossed the room and took his hands. "I am glad I married you, Vincent Shaw. I think this might be the best decision I have ever made." He lifted her hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "I hope I can live up to that faith." The weeks following their wedding fell into a new rhythm. To the outside world, they were husband and wife, and the gossip that had begun when Eleanor first came to stay at the ranch died down. Mrs. Patterson was delighted to have her matchmaking instincts confirmed and treated them both with smug satisfaction. But privately, Vincent and Eleanor were still learning how to be married. They continued sleeping in separate rooms. They worked together during the day, side by side in the garden or the barn, and they talked each evening on the porch or by the fire. Slowly, carefully, they were building intimacy of a different sort, an intimacy of shared dreams and mutual respect. Vincent found himself falling in love with his wife in increments. He loved the way she hummed while she worked. He loved her fierce determination to master new skills. He loved the way she laughed at his terrible jokes, and the way she always insisted on saying grace before meals even though he sometimes forgot. He loved the kindness she showed to the animals, and the way she had started leaving little wild bouquets around the house. Eleanor, for her part, was discovering what it meant to be cherished. Vincent asked her opinion on ranch decisions. He brought her small gifts when he went to town, a packet of seeds for her garden or a book she had mentioned wanting to read. He never raised his voice to her or made her feel small. He looked at her as though she were precious, valuable, worthy of respect. One evening in late June, they were sitting on the porch watching a thunderstorm roll in across the plains. The air smelled of rain and earth, and lightning flickered on the horizon. Eleanor had her feet tucked up under her skirt, and Vincent was whittling a piece of wood into the rough shape of a horse. "Vincent," Eleanor said suddenly, "I think I am falling in love with you." His hands stilled on the wood. "You think? I know I am. I just wanted to say it out loud." She turned to look at him. "I did not think it was possible to feel this way, to wake up each morning excited to see someone, to feel my heart speed up when I hear your voice. Is that love?" Vincent set down his whittling and turned to face her fully. "I think it must be, because that is exactly how I feel about you. I have been in love with you for weeks now, Eleanor. I just did not want to say it and make you feel pressured." "You love me." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I do. Completely. I love your strength and your gentleness. I love your laugh and the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating. I love the life we are building together." He reached out and cupped her face in his hand. "I love you, Eleanor Shaw." She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. "I love you too, and I am ready." "Ready for what?" She opened her eyes and looked at him with an expression that made his breath catch. "Ready to be your wife in every way, ready to share your bed and your life completely." Vincent felt his heart begin to pound. "Are you certain?" "I am certain." She stood and held out her hand to him. "Come with me." He took her hand and let her lead him into the house, through the main room and down the short hallway. But instead of going to her room, she pulled him into his. His room, which would now be their room. What happened next was tender and awkward and beautiful. They fumbled with buttons and laces, laughing nervously and murmuring reassurances. Vincent was patient, Eleanor was brave, and together they discovered the physical intimacy that made their marriage complete. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Vincent's arm around Eleanor's shoulders, her head resting on his chest. The storm had arrived, rain drumming on the roof and wind rattling the windows. But inside they were warm and safe and happier than either of them had known was possible. "I was so afraid," Eleanor whispered. "With my first husband, the marriage bed was just another duty, something to be endured. I thought it would always be that way." Vincent pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "And now I understand what all the fuss is about." She tilted her face up to look at him, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "I think we should practice frequently to make sure we get it right." He laughed and pulled her closer. "I think that is an excellent idea, Mrs. Shaw." As summer deepened into fall, Vincent and Eleanor settled into married life with the ease of people who had been together for years rather than months. The ranch prospered under their joint care. The new cattle Vincent had purchased were thriving, and Eleanor's kitchen garden produced abundantly, enough that she could sell the surplus in town. Mrs. Patterson continued to come 3 times a week, but now it was more for companionship than necessity. Eleanor had become a skilled ranch wife, capable of managing the household and helping with the outdoor work as well. She learned to ride, though she preferred the gentle mare Vincent bought for her to the more spirited horses he rode. She learned to shoot, though she hated it and only agreed because Vincent insisted she needed to know how to defend herself when he was away. The people of Opal gradually accepted Eleanor as Vincent's wife rather than the preacher's widow. A few of the women who had shunned her when she first arrived tried to befriend her now, but Eleanor was cool to them, remembering how they had treated her in her time of need. She made friends instead with other ranch wives, women who understood the hard work and the isolation and the deep satisfaction of building something from nothing. In November, Eleanor realized she was pregnant. She told Vincent over breakfast one morning, simply and directly, watching his face carefully to gauge his reaction. "I am going to have a baby, sometime in the spring, I think." Vincent dropped his fork. Truly. Are you pleased?" He stood so quickly his chair nearly toppled backward and came around the table to pull her into his arms. "Pleased does not begin to cover it. I am overjoyed, terrified but overjoyed." Eleanor laughed and held him tight. "I am terrified too. I do not know the first thing about being a mother. We will figure it out together, just like we have figured out everything else." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes shining. "A baby, our baby. Eleanor, this is incredible." Mrs. Patterson was beside herself with excitement when they told her the news. She immediately began knitting tiny clothes and offering advice drawn from her years of helping other women through pregnancy and childbirth. Eleanor, who had no mother or sisters to guide her, was grateful for the older woman's wisdom and support. The winter was harsh that year, with blizzards that sometimes trapped them inside for days at a time. But Vincent and Eleanor did not mind. They spent the long, dark evenings planning for the baby, arguing playfully about names and making furniture from scraps of wood. Vincent crafted a beautiful cradle, carving flowers and vines into the sides, while Eleanor sewed blankets and gowns. Her pregnancy was not easy. She was sick for the first few months, able to keep down only bland foods and weak tea. Vincent hovered anxiously, bringing her whatever she could stomach and holding her hair when she was ill. As she grew larger, she struggled with backaches and swollen ankles. But through it all, she remained cheerful, marveling at the life growing inside her. "You hope for a boy or a girl?" she asked Vincent one night as they lay in bed, her rounded belly pressed against his side. "I do not care as long as the baby is healthy and you come through the birth safely," he said honestly. "But if I had to choose, maybe a girl, a daughter with your green eyes and your determination. I think a boy, a son who looks like you and has your kindness." She took his hand and placed it on her belly. "Feel that. The baby is kicking." Vincent felt the flutter of movement beneath his palm and was overcome with wonder. "That is our child, a person we made together." "It is extraordinary, is it not? This time last year I was alone and lost, sleeping in a chapel with no idea what would become of me. And now I have a husband I love and a baby on the way. My life has become something I never imagined it could be." "My life too," Vincent said softly. "You have made me happier than I ever thought possible, Eleanor." The baby came on a warm day in early May, arriving after a long and difficult labor that left Eleanor exhausted and Vincent a nervous wreck. Mrs. Patterson acted as midwife, her calm competence the only thing that kept Vincent from falling apart completely as Eleanor labored through the day and into the night. When the baby finally emerged, red-faced and squalling, Mrs. Patterson announced, "It is a boy, a fine, healthy boy." Eleanor, drenched in sweat and nearly delirious with pain and exhaustion, reached for the baby with shaking hands. Mrs. Patterson placed the infant on her chest, and Eleanor looked down at her son with an expression of pure awe. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your mama." Vincent knelt beside the bed, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his wife and newborn son. "He is perfect. You are perfect. Eleanor, you are the strongest, bravest person I have ever known." They named the baby Victor Samuel Shaw after Vincent and his father. He was a good baby, healthy and strong-lunged, with a cap of dark hair and eyes that would eventually turn the same stormy gray as his father's. Eleanor took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else. She nursed Victor and rocked him, and sang him lullabies in a voice that was surprisingly sweet. Vincent was a devoted father, walking the floor with the baby when he cried at night, changing soiled cloths without complaint, staring at his son with the same wonder he had felt when he first held Eleanor's hand. As Victor grew from infant to baby to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Vincent's careful breeding program was paying off, and his herd was becoming known for its quality. He hired a couple of young men to help with the work, giving him more time to spend with his family. Eleanor had never been happier. The loneliness and grief that had defined her first marriage were distant memories, replaced by a life rich with love and purpose. She loved being Vincent's wife, loved the partnership they had built, loved the passion that still sparked between them even after years together. And she loved being Victor's mother, watching him grow and learn and develop his own personality. When Victor was 2, Eleanor found herself pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and when she went into labor on a crisp autumn morning, the birth was mercifully quick. The baby was a girl, small and delicate with wispy blonde hair and green eyes just like her mother's. "What should we name her?" Vincent asked, cradling his daughter with the confidence of an experienced father. Eleanor smiled tiredly from the bed. "I was thinking Vera. It means faith." "Vera Shaw, I like it." He brought the baby to Eleanor and watched as she nursed for the first time. "We have a son and a daughter now. Our family is complete." "Is it?" Eleanor looked up at him with a teasing smile. "You do not want more children." "I want whatever makes you happy." "If you want a dozen children, we will have a dozen. If you want to stop at 2, we stop at 2. Let us see how we manage with these 2 first," Eleanor laughed. "Ask me again in a few years." Those years passed quickly, full of the chaos and joy of raising small children while running a ranch. Victor grew into a sturdy, curious boy who followed his father everywhere, asking endless questions about cattle and horses and grass. Vera was more reserved, content to sit with her mother in the garden or the kitchen, helping with small tasks and chattering away in her sweet, high voice. The Shaw Ranch became one of the most successful in the territory. Vincent's cattle were in high demand, and he was able to hire more help and expand his holdings. He and Eleanor built a larger house, a proper 2-story structure with a parlor and dining room and 4 bedrooms. Eleanor furnished it carefully, mixing practical necessities with a few beautiful things, making it a home that was both comfortable and welcoming. Mrs. Patterson remained a constant presence in their lives, watching the children and helping Eleanor with the endless work of managing a household. She was there for Victor's first day of school in the small schoolhouse that had been built in opal. She was there when Vera took her first steps and when Eleanor taught both children to ride. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Vincent gave Eleanor a locked diary with a key on a chain. "For your thoughts and memories," he said, "so you can remember how far we have come." Eleanor opened the diary and saw that the first page was already filled with Vincent's handwriting. She read, "5 years ago today, I married the woman I found sleeping in a chapel, the woman I offered a bed and my last name. It was the best decision I have ever made. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for making me happier than I ever dreamed possible. With all my love, Vincent." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Vincent Shaw, you are going to make me cry. Happy tears, I hope. The happiest." She threw her arms around his neck and kissed him thoroughly. "I love you so much. I never knew life could be this good." When Victor was 8 and Vera was 6, Eleanor found herself pregnant once more. This time, she gave birth to twin boys, identical and impossible to tell apart. They named them Thomas and Timothy, and they brought a new level of energy and chaos to the household. Vincent joked that they now had enough sons to help run the ranch and enough love to fill a dozen houses. Eleanor, exhausted from chasing 4 children under the age of 10, agreed that their family was definitely complete now. The years continued to roll by, marked by the changing seasons and the growing children. Victor developed a talent for working with horses and took over that aspect of the ranch. Vera learned to keep the ranch books and proved to have a head for numbers that impressed even her father. The twins were wild and mischievous, always getting into trouble, but they were also inseparable and fiercely protective of each other and their siblings. Eleanor sometimes thought back to that morning when she had woken in the chapel to find Vincent standing there, hat in hand, offering her a way forward when she had none. She thought of how frightened she had been, how lost, and now look at her life. A husband who loved her deeply, 4 healthy children, a prosperous ranch, a place in the community. She had gone from widow sleeping on a church pew to matriarch of a thriving family. On their 10th anniversary, Vincent and Eleanor took a rare day away from the ranch, leaving the children with Mrs. Patterson. They packed a picnic and rode out to a high meadow, the same meadow where Vincent had proposed. The wildflowers were in bloom, painting the ground in shades of purple and yellow and white. They spread a blanket and sat together, eating cold chicken and bread and watching the clouds drift overhead. Eleanor leaned against Vincent's shoulder, his arm around her waist, and felt the deep contentment that came from being exactly where she was meant to be. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" she asked. "If you had not come into that chapel that morning, if you had not offered me your help." "I try not to," Vincent admitted. "The thought of you going off to some city alone, struggling to make your way, maybe ending up in a bad situation, it makes my blood run cold. And I think of you here alone, working yourself to exhaustion with no one to share your life with. It makes me sad." We were both lonely, both lost in our own ways. He pressed a kiss to her temple. "And then we found each other. I believe that was meant to be, Eleanor. I believe we were put in each other's paths for a reason." "So do I." She turned her face up to his. "Thank you for offering me your last name, Vincent Shaw. Thank you for giving me a home and a family and a love I never thought I would have. Thank you for accepting. Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy you had only just met. Thank you for every day of these past 10 years. He kissed her then, slow and deep, with all the passion and tenderness of a decade of love. When they finally pulled apart, Eleanor laughed and pushed her hair out of her face. "We should probably head back before the children drive poor Mrs. Patterson to distraction." "Probably. But let us stay just a little longer. Moments like this are precious." They lay back on the blanket, hand in hand, watching the sky. Eleanor thought about the girl she had been, the scared young widow with no family and no prospects. She thought about how close she had come to taking a different path, one that might have led to hardship or worse. And she thought about the miracle of Vincent, this good, kind man who had seen her at her lowest moment and offered help without expectation of anything in return. Their love story had not been love at first sight. It had been slow and careful, built on friendship and respect and mutual need. But it had grown into something deep and true, something that sustained them through hard times and made the good times sweeter. As they rode back to the ranch as the sun began to set, Eleanor looked at the house rising in the distance, smoke curling from the chimney, and knew that she was looking at home. Not just a building, but a place filled with people she loved and who loved her in return. The children ran out to meet them, Victor helping his younger siblings and Vera calling out questions about their day. Vincent dismounted and swung Vera up into his arms, then ruffled the twins' hair. Eleanor slid down from her mare and gathered them all close, breathing in the smell of grass and earth and home. That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Vincent and Eleanor sat together on the porch as they had done countless times before. The Montana sky stretched above them, vast and star-filled, and the night air was cool and sweet. "I am content," Eleanor said softly. "Truly, deeply content. Whatever happens from here, whether we have 50 more years together or only 5, I want you to know that you have given me the best life I could have imagined." Vincent pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "We will have 50 years, at least. I plan to grow old with you, Eleanor Shaw. I plan to watch our children grow and have children of their own. I plan to sit on this porch with you when we are gray and wrinkled, still holding hands, still grateful for the day I found you in that chapel." "That sounds perfect," Eleanor whispered, and it was. The years that followed were full of the ordinary miracles that make up a life well lived. Victor married a sweet young woman from a neighboring ranch and brought her to live at the Shaw place, building a small house on the property for his growing family. Vera eventually married a banker from Helena and moved to the city, though she visited often and always brought her children to spend summers on the ranch. The twins took over more and more of the ranch work as Vincent and Eleanor aged, proving themselves capable and hardworking. They each eventually married and brought their wives to the ranch, expanding the family holdings and turning the Shaw Ranch into a true dynasty. Vincent and Eleanor became grandparents, then great-grandparents. They watched their family tree spread and flourish, secure in the knowledge that they had built something that would last long after they were gone. When Vincent was 73, he fell ill with pneumonia. Eleanor nursed him through it with the same fierce determination she had brought to everything else in their life together. He recovered, but he was never quite as strong afterward. "I am slowing down," he admitted to Eleanor one evening as they sat in their bedroom, him in his chair by the window and her in hers beside him. "We both are," she said. "But that is natural. We have earned the right to slow down." "I have no regrets, Eleanor, not a single one." "Neither do I." She reached across the space between their chairs and took his hand. "Marrying you was the best thing that ever happened to me." "Finding you in that chapel was my salvation," Vincent said. "You gave my life meaning and purpose. You gave me love and family and joy. I could not have asked for more." They sat together in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the sun set over the land they had worked and loved for so many years. Vincent Shaw passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later, at the age of 75. Eleanor held his hand as he took his last breath, tears streaming down her face but her heart full of gratitude for the 50 years they had shared. She lived for another 5 years after that, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She told them stories about their grandfather, about the day he found her sleeping in a chapel and offered her a bed and his last name. She told them about the love that had grown from that simple act of kindness, about the life they had built together. Eleanor Shaw died at the age of 78, sitting in her chair on the porch with a quilt over her lap and a smile on her face. Her family said it was as though she simply decided it was time to go be with Vincent again. They buried her next to him on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the wide Montana sky. Their headstone read, "Vincent Shaw, 1852–1927, Eleanor Shaw, 1855–1933. Together they built a legacy of love, and indeed they had." The ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down through their children and their children's children. But more than the land or the cattle or the buildings, Vincent and Eleanor left behind a legacy of kindness, of taking chances on each other, of building something beautiful from loss and loneliness. Their story became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and holidays. The tale of the preacher's widow sleeping in the chapel and the cowboy who offered her a bed and his last name. The tale of how a simple act of compassion had blossomed into a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. Because love, real love, is not always dramatic or instantaneous. Sometimes it grows slowly from kindness and respect. Sometimes it is built day by day, choice by choice, moment by moment. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with passion, but with one person seeing another person in need and simply offering help. Vincent Shaw had seen Eleanor Zimmerman at her lowest point and had not turned away. He had offered her shelter and safety and eventually his heart. And Eleanor had been brave enough to accept, to take a chance on a stranger who offered her hope when she had none. From that single moment of connection had grown a family, a legacy, a love story that would be remembered for generations. And if love can transcend death, then Vincent and Eleanor Shaw were surely together still, watching over the land they loved and the family they had created, their hands linked just as they had been on that porch so many years ago, grateful for the day their paths had crossed in a small chapel in Opal, Montana territory, in the spring of 1878.